Hi everybody, I'm Donna and I'm an alcoholic. I am very happy to be at your meeting tonight. I was at this, in this room at least a few years ago, but I've been told it's a different meeting. And I want to thank Michael for inviting us to come down and spend some time with you, and thank Polly and Dave for coming along with us again tonight. I'm very honored to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous in any way there is, and I have to tell you right now that I'm one of those people that if I would have known me when I was new, I'd have been somebody I just would have wanted to slap them, I mean, I am so happy and so contented, and I just love my life so much that it's just nauseating. I mean, you don't even want to be around me, At least that's the way it would have been for me when I was new. But I couldn't have imagined living the way I live today. That was beyond anything I could have even dreamed of. And when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought that success in this program, or just about anything that had to do with life, was for other people. That's the way it had always been for me. And I didn't expect to, everybody said things, God, when you're new, they tell you things like, make a list of everything you want in your life, and a year from now you'll just be amazed at how you've undershot the mark so much, and that didn't even interest me. I mean, I didn't believe for a second that this was going to work for me. And I am more blessed. I would rather be me than anybody I know, and that's an amazing thing for somebody like me, because all I ever wanted to do was change it all. And I'm very grateful, and I owe my life to Alcoholics Anonymous. I owe my life to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the instructions that I found in the big book on how to recreate a life that truly is more than I could have ever imagined. And if I don't know, if they'd probably tried to explain that to me when I was new, but it wouldn't have interested me, that kind of character building just wasn't what I thought sounded like a great thing to be doing. But, trust me, if you are new and in this meeting, and, whether this is your first time here or your 100th time here, stay here. This is the mother lode. This is the place where miracles happen, I'm very, very grateful for every bit of my journey. And I'm happy to share that story with you tonight, what that was like, what it used to be like for me, and what happened to me, and what it's like now. My sobriety date is the 5th of May, 1987, and my sponsor is Polly P. And my home group is also the sobriety capital of the world in Indio, California. And it meets at 8:30 on a Friday night, and it's a wild and crazy group. It's very raucous, very enthusiastic. No one has ever accuse them of being a glum lot, let me tell you. They're just nuts there. But there's a real, passion for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I love there. And it is a recovery home. It takes place in a recovery home, and that makes it a really good venue to find a lot of new people to work with. And that's one of the things I love so much about that place. When I came into AA, I'm not from California. I'm from Montana. And I was, I was just a sleazy little drunk. I just did a lot of drinking in a lot of these cowboy bars up in Montana, and I was just a wild and crazy little drunk. And I didn't start drinking until I was 27 years old. I mean, before I even get started, for the new people that are here, whatever I say that you don't relate with, I mean, anymore you can go into a meeting and find people 12 years old that have hit bottom and are getting sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. But, that just isn't my case. And if you don't relate to what I have to say, that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. The details of my story are not relevant. I just tell it because that's the only story I have, I didn't start drinking until I was 27. I had 5 kids. They were ages 6 through 9 months old. I was newly divorced, and I was angry. I was very, very angry, and I went to work in the cowboy bars up in Montana, and up until that time, I had come from a home that was just torn apart by alcoholism. There was all the violence and abuse and neglect and horrific things that are created in the disease and the pit of alcoholism in my home. And I determined at a young age that I was not going to drink because I didn't want to be like them, I didn't want to do what they did. I didn't want to live like they lived. So I held out until I was 27 years old. I was probably like psychotic, because I was so freaked out and angry, and I had no solution for living, and I had not found a solution. And I just walked around this bundle of anger and hatred and self-loathing and fear and shame and secrets. Man, I had more secrets than a person had a right to. And when I was 27 years old and I got a divorce and I went to work in these cowboy bars up in Montana, I started drinking a little bit. And I'm telling you, as clear as a bell today, what I know happened to me is that when I started drinking liquor, I found a power greater than myself that made life work for me for the first time. And I needed that relief so bad. I needed to be able to put some distance between me and me, you know. There was a guy I used to drink with all the time up in Red Lodge, Montana. He used to say, let's get drunk and be somebody. And I always said, let's get drunk and be somebody else. You know, and that is exactly what makes me an alcoholic. That is what did it for me. It is, you know, there's a place in the Big Book that says that, and I paraphrase when I quote the Big Book, but basically what it says is that many of us don't have to drink the length of time or take the amount that others do. And it says that it's particularly true with women. It says that women often become the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few short years. And that's it. That's my drunkalogue right there. You know, I had a lousy life before I found booze. I was a very depressed, scared person, very suicidal. I was just really not a fun person to hang around with. And then I found booze, and I was the life of the party, you know. I was a blackout drinker, and I was in trouble with drinking from the gate. But booze gave me what I needed, what I'd been looking for forever. It gave me the ability to be comfortable in my own skin. It made it okay for me to be me. It was okay that I had the history that I did and the family that I did, and I could put all that stuff away and just walk out and be somebody else, you know. And that's what I wanted from alcohol, and that's what I got. And, you know, if you're a blackout drinker, it was a terrible way to live, you know. I mean, there's just nothing more annoying to me than to hear people say to me, don't you remember what you did last night? You know, I just hated that. That is just disgusting. I mean, they never say nice things, you know. It's never decent things. It's always this bizarre, weird stuff that I can't even imagine. You know, I can remember standing there saying, geez, I don't even think that about your husband. You know, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. And, you know, and it was just like not a fun way to live. But you couldn't have convinced me that I wasn't having fun, because alcohol made me happy, joyous, and free. You know, alcohol was my higher power. Alcohol made it okay for me to be me, and I was willing to do whatever I had to do to maintain that right to drink. My little kids that I had as a single mom were on their own. They were, my oldest daughter, who was, God, I don't know, she must have been about 7 or 8 when I started drinking. And she was 14 when she left home. But, you know, during that time, she became the parent in our home. I mean, she helped me make every decision that I had to make. You know, everything from, do I take this new job? Should we move into this other house? Or what should I wear today? I mean, and I thought that we were very close. I remember, that she was my ally. She was the person I leaned on. I was a single parent, and I felt like I was really this cool mom that gave her a lot of options and let her make a lot of choices for herself. But the truth is, all she wanted was a mother, and she didn't have that. And I remember when she was an angry 14-year-old and she left my home, I remember saying, you know, Trina, I always thought we were so close. I was blown away that she would leave me. And she just looked at me, you know, with all the contempt that a little pre-Al-Anon could have. And she just said, you know, Mom, I have always been your friend, but you have never been mine. You know, and that's the reality of my disease. That and a lot of things like that are the things that I don't want to forget. I mean, I could stand up here and tell you a lot of funny stories about drinking, and I had some fun. I had some very wild and crazy times. Alcohol did everything for me that I needed for it to do and more. And that's the reality of it. But the truth of the matter is there's things that I don't ever want to forget. You know, it took me places I didn't want to go, with people I didn't want to know, and it cost me the dearest, most important things in my life. You know, it cost me the relationships that meant more to me than anything in the world. And the respect of my children, the respect of myself, which I don't know that I had a lot of that, but whatever I did have was gone. And, I'm very, very grateful that I don't have to live like an alcoholic woman today. I'm very grateful. I would rather die than live like an alcoholic woman. It's a horrible, horrible way to live, and it's a very slow form of suicide, you know. The very end of my drinking, there was this place that I used to drink. It's called the Snag Bar. And it's this place in Montana up in Red Lodge, and it was just a creepy little place. It was the kind of place that you could smell before you got to it when you were walking down the sidewalk, you know. And it was not a fancy cocktail lounge, and they opened at 7 o'clock in the morning. And in the beginning, when I was drinking in Red Lodge, I wouldn't even go in that place. And at the end of my drinking, that was the only place I ever went. And I would go there at 7 in the morning and have my first cup of coffee if I was going to have coffee, you know. And I'd pick up my mail at the post office and hit the snag, and I put in a lot of double shifts there, and I very seldom ever worked there. It was, I'd just go in the morning and sit down, and you'd start drinking and talking, and people come and people go, and the next thing you know, it's 2 a.m., and, you know, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, and that's just the way it was. You know, it was just, that's it. I don't have an exciting, wonderful, dramatic drunkalogue, you know, that's it. It was horrible. And I'm so grateful that I don't have to live like that. But at the time, and I'm very grateful still that I found what I found in alcohol, because I really think if I had not found that, and I hadn't been able to get some relief from the kind of stuff that I was walking around with, I don't know if I'd be alive today. You know, as self-destructive as I was very suicidal. I started drinking, and it was just went from bad to worse, and from worse to worse than that, you know. And I just wasn't, I remember when I came into AA, there were people, I heard people talk about drinking for 30 years or 40 years, and I felt ripped off. Because you know, I could only stomach this for about 8 years. I had all I could take. And I remember feeling like I had missed something, you know, that it wasn't fair, that I couldn't make it work for me longer, but I just couldn't do it. I was in big trouble, and I needed help. I hit the rooms of AA for the first time in February of 1981, and a lot like Terry's story, I didn't find what you do here. I didn't find this deal. I came into the rooms of AA. I went into Red Lodge to the only AA meeting they have, one meeting a week up there, and there were about 6 people that were the core members of that group. And you know, I looked around at these people, and you know, when you're new, when you're brand new, and you walk into an AA meeting and you look around and you see people that are smiling and they're happy to see each other, and they're dressed nicely and they're talking to each other and hugging, and you know, I mean, that was like, this is not what I wanted to do. I mean, here I am in AA, you know, and it was just, oh my God. And I mean, these people just annoyed me no end. They wanted to look in my eye and welcome me, and I did not come into AA glad to be here. I just didn't. I didn't trust these people any more than I'd ever trust anybody, which was not at all. And it's amazing to me now, but really, for the first several years of my sobriety, I was not someone who felt at home in Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that this is where I needed to be. I knew that I was an alcoholic, and I knew that this was the answer for me, but I didn't come in here and go, my people, you know? This is where I belong, you know? I mean, this is where I belong. This was not good news to me, and I wasn't happy about it, and I didn't stay. I came in here with all of this secrets and fear and shame and guilt and self-loathing, and I stayed with that for a long time. And I didn't know that I was supposed to, you know, I didn't know I was supposed to tell anybody about that. I mean, I'd lived that way my whole life. I didn't know I was supposed to say to someone, I am so afraid I can't even sleep at night. I have, you know, things that terrify me, and I don't even know what they are. I just have this feeling that it's just I'm going to explode and my guts are going to go all over the room or something. I mean, I didn't know how to verbalize those things. I don't know that I even was aware that that's how I felt. And so I stayed with my secrets. I came in here and I tried to act like you act. I tried to dress like you dress. I talked like you talk. I read how it works. I poured the coffee. I did whatever you do, and that was it. And it didn't work, and I bounced in and out of AA for almost 7 years. And, you know, there are a lot of people that I know and admire greatly in AA that came in here for the first time, came into Alcoholics Anonymous, got sober, and never had to leave. And I you know, what I did is not the way it's supposed to be. It's not, you know, the norm, or I don't know that there is a norm. I just know that that's what I had to do. I just couldn't, I didn't know how to do this. And you couldn't have told me that, though, because I'm a smart person, and I thought I had this all figured out. And I wasn't asking for a lot of help, you know. But I came into AA, and this was just confusing to me. I mean, I just wanted to just act as if, and just, you know. There was this guy I heard one time, it just summarizes it for me. I'm one of those people that gets a mental image, and it helps me to understand what I'm talking about. And he always said that you can sit in a chicken coop till your butt falls off, and it won't make you a chicken. And that's what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can sit in meetings day in and day out, and it won't make you a recovering person. But I didn't know that. You know, I came in here, and I just went to a lot of meetings, and I was imitating you. And I thought that maybe it would make me a chicken, and it didn't do it, you know. I kept having to, when I'm the kind of drunk that when you take booze away from me, the guilt and the fear and the shame and the self-loathing and the hatred that I have for myself and who I am and the way my life is and the resentments that I have gets so huge that I can't stand one more minute, and I have to get some relief. And I'm an alcoholic, and I know how to get that relief, and every time it would lead me back out there. You know, there was a lot of stuff in AA that really confused me. I used to go to meetings in Billings, which was like the big town, you know, and it was about 60 miles away, and we would drive up there. And there was this guy that I used to listen to all the time in this meeting. He was this tall, skinny cowboy. He would just annoy me no end. He always had some kind of manure on his boots and a big wad of Copenhagen in his lip, you know, and he would say stuff in these meetings that I totally could not understand. I remember him saying things like, you know, when it comes to pain and sobriety, you just have to be like the mule in the hailstorm. You just have to hunker down and take it. And I remember thinking, I was hoping for more than that. I mean, that was not a big consolation to me. And he was the first guy that I ever heard say that when it came to drinking, he was like the tomcat making love to the skunk. He hadn't had all he wanted, but he had all he could stand. And I thought this guy was the lamest person I'd ever met. And then what in the world are you talking about? Anyway, I bounced in and out of here trying to act as if for a long time. And what happened for me is exactly what's described in the book. You know, it gets worse, never better. You know, we read it when we read chapter 3. That's more about alcoholism. And I had to do more about alcoholism for about 7 years. And I would stay sober as long as I could stand it. I mean, I might stay sober for 30 days, and then I'd get drunk for, 30 days. Then I'd come back here and stay sober for 90 days, and then get drunk for a week. And then I'd be, you know what I mean, it'd just be in and out, in and out. I must have raised my hand as a newcomer in AA meetings maybe 30 times over 7 years. And in the beginning, I used to come in here with firm resolve that, like, you know, you are going to go in there and get sober. You're going to go into that AA, and you're going to do what they tell you to do, and you're going to be like them. You'll just do what they do. And towards the end, I had no hope or literally no, you know, I don't know. I might have had a desire, but I did not believe that I was going to get sober. I was just putting as many days together as I could before I drank again, and I knew that I was going to drink again because I always had. I was the resident loser in AA, you know. It's very annoying. It really, really is hard. Somewhere along this line, my kids left me. They went to visit their dad over Christmas. Christmas is always a significant time for me, and this time of year. They went to visit their dad over Christmas, and they said, you know, Mom's going to kill herself, and we don't know what to do for her. And so he kept them. And I tried then with everything in me to get sober. I wanted more than anything in the world to be sober, because if I wasn't sober, that was the only way I was going to get those kids back. And I wanted them back. I wanted them, and I needed them in my life. That was more important to me than anything. And, my next lesson that I had to learn was that it doesn't, you know, there's a place in the book also that says that, you know, that there comes a time that even the most incredible desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. And that was what happened to me. You know, I mean, I wanted more than anything to be sober, and I could not do it. If wanting to be sober was enough to make this happen, there isn't a newcomer that walks through the doors of AA who doesn't want to be sober. Otherwise, why in the world would you come here, you know? Everybody wants to be sober, which is so we can't stand being sober, and so that's why they go back out again. And the truth of the matter is, see, this is what I didn't know, is that Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, is designed to create a replacement for that. The idea that I haven't had a drink in 13 and a half years is not as significant to me as the idea that I have not needed a drink. And I've had some stuff happen to me. I mean, it hasn't been like, you know, you put the plug in the jug and everything is great and life is good and it's happy, joyous, and free straight from there, you know. It wasn't like that. That's probably what I was expecting, which was a little disappointing. You know, I'd get into pain, and I know where to go to get pain relief. And that's what would happen to me over and over again. Life would pay me a visit in some form or another. I wasn't going to get what I wanted. I was going to lose something I had, and I would go and get some relief. And, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to effectuate a change within us so that we no longer have to do what we had to do to get relief from that pain. And I didn't know that. And it's a miracle that I survived the process of finding that out, you know. After my kids left, there's a man, one of the men I admire so very much in AA, Frank H., out of Long Beach, says that the Alcoholics Anonymous is not a program for people who want it, and it's not a program for people who need it. It's a program for people who do it. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether you believe this. It doesn't matter that I mean, I wasn't even hoping for anything big, you know. I didn't even wish for anything. I'd been a failure and a loser my whole life, and I just knew that it was going to be more of that. But when I began to do it, when I began to do things that were different than what made sense to me to do, I started to get a result. I had done a geographic after my kids were gone in one of my big attempts to get sober. I went to Kona, Hawaii, and I was living over there, and I was going to meetings, and I was, doing the deal. What I thought, I was doing the deal. I mean, I wanted to be sober more than anything. And I was living in Kona, and, I had to find out what I guess the level of my true powerlessness. I invited my daughter over for her 16th birthday, and the whole thing was all set up. I had it all planned. It was going to be perfect. She's going to come over. We're going to have this great time. I'm going to say, all right, sweetheart, I'm going to come home and get a house, and we're all going to move back in together, and it'll all be great. And at that time, I had a little bit over a year. I had more time than I'd ever dreamed of having in AA. I had like 13 and a half months. And it was all because I was waiting to get my kids back. And she said, no, Mom, we don't want to live with you anymore. And I lost my reason to stay sober, I lost what I was staying sober for. And I ended up drinking over in Kona, and that's when I really, really lost it. And I got to tell you, I had drank way worse than that. I had gotten in way more trouble than that. I had been much sicker than that. But I couldn't stay sober. I mean, it just was horrible. And I was angry, and I was frustrated, and I would go into those AA meetings, and everybody in there just irritated me. I mean, they are happy, and they're smiling, and they're hugging. And over in Hawaii, they not only hug you, they kiss you. They get on every nerve you've got. And, I was just like angry. I did not understand this. There were people in there that, it seemed to me like I was very arrogant. Ha, surprise. It's the alcoholic. I would look around and say, these people are so lame, and they are not drinking. What is wrong with this picture? I knew some really ignorant people that were perfectly happy sober. And I, with all my, intellect, could not figure this deal out. And I was in there just really angry. I was in a meeting one night, and at the end of the meeting, it was in Kona, they do this thing, is there anybody here for their first, second, or third meeting since their last drink? And then everybody would look at me to see if I'm going to raise my hand today, And people would, say things to me like, you don't ever have to feel this way again if you don't want to, and it just would really bug me, because I thought, because I knew that I would want to. I wouldn't want to feel this way again, but I knew that I would need relief again. And I was just in there stringing as many days together as I could. And I had a few weeks going, but that was it. And it was like I had no notion of staying sober. I didn't believe for a second that it was possible for me. And I was in a meeting one night, and this guy at the end of the meeting asked if there was a burning desire. And for some reason, I raised my hand, and I said, yeah, I got a burning desire for you. I said, you people really make me sick. I said, you keep telling me that sober is better, and sober does not feel better to me. And, I don't even know what I said. I just know I said it, I was kind of like, what are you going to do about it? I had this bad attitude. And after I stopped talking, there was this kind of silence for a minute, and then somebody went, oh, right on, Donna, keep coming back, And it was just, I was so frustrated. After the meeting that night, I said to this guy, I don't know why this program won't work for me, but it just won't work. And he said, well, how many days has it been since you've drank? And I said, 45 days. I mean, I was, now there's the thing. 45 days is a little string of time. I mean, if drinking was my problem, 45 days I should be feeling okay, maybe even great. But I was feeling worse and angrier and more raw and more, without a clue as to how to do life, just completely like a fish out of water. And it was worse at 45 days than it had been maybe at 5 days. And I couldn't put that together. He showed me a line in the 12 and 12. There's one line that says, in every case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. In every case. And, it isn't just sometimes. It isn't for some of us. It's for every one of us. Pain is the price of admission. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe what I'm going through is not for nothing. All it did was buy me one more day, I came back to the meeting that night, and there was this woman that was in the meeting, and her name was Phyllis Cowman. She died a long time ago. She was about 27 years sober. This lady was awesome. She blew my mind. She was over in Kona for a month's vacation right after her husband had just died. And she was there, you know, kind of for some vacation, for some R&R. She knew people in Kona, and she went there and was staying with them, and she was just going to kick it back and go to lots of meetings and hang out on the beach and just kind of take a breather. You know, she'd been through a lot. And she stood up at the podium that night, that Saturday night, and she told her story. And the thing that got me about this was that, you know, in this way, she told my story. I mean, the details of her story were not the same. Like, I had 5 kids, she had 2 kids, you know. She was like this jet setter. She was this, you know, always running around from country to country drinking extremely expensive wines. I hung out in the Snag bar, but she was a sleazy little drunk, though. She knew about drinking. She knew all about drinking, and there was nothing I could say that would surprise her. But the thing that I related to so much was the feelings that she had about herself and the feelings that she had about the world, how this is supposed to work, you know. She talked about the secrets and the shame and the fear and the guilt and the self-loathing. And she talked about the things that she grew up with, the things that she couldn't let anyone know. And I mean, that was me. That was me. And it was amazing to hear this. She also was one of these people that absolutely loved being sober. She loved being in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she loved drunks. And she didn't care if you were drunk or sober. I mean, you didn't have to smell good and look nice to get Phyllis's attention. She had this special gift that you develop after you've been around here a while of being able to look around the room and pick out the sickest woman there and go right for her, you know. And she just came up and put her arm around me, and she said, "Sweetheart, you just stay by me and everything's going to be okay." And I just melted. I mean, this lady was incredible. She was like almost 70 years old. She was not young, but she was gorgeous. And she just lit up the room, you know. And she was just such an attraction to me. I just fell in love with her. I understood what she was saying. I related to her. You know, and there were probably 100 wonderful people in Alcoholics Anonymous who had shared with me the message of AA. But this was the lady that I heard. And, you know, she came up and put her arm around me, and she said, "You know, if I had a daughter, she'd be just like you. She'd be really sick." And I remember thinking that was very cool. I thought that meant she liked me, you know. And I just loved her. I just loved her, and I trusted her. I don't know how that happens, because I don't do that. I'm not the kind of person to do that. And I spent every minute that I could with her. And this is what happened. This is the part about what happened to me that made the difference, is that we were on the beach one day, and we're laying in the sun, and I said to Phyllis, "You know, I probably need to do another 4th step, right?" And she said, "No, you just need to do a 1st step, that's all." And I mean, I said, "Well, I don't know what you mean. How do you do a 1st step? I mean, I know that I'm an alcoholic. I know that. What do you mean? How do you do a 1st step?" And she said that there's implied action in the 1st step of Alcoholics Anonymous. She said it says that we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives are unmanageable. And she said the implied action there is that you need new management. She said you need to find a power greater than you are that will solve your problem. She said, and you need somebody with skin on them, somebody living and breathing right here on earth that you can talk to about your thinking, because it's your thinking that's getting you in a lot of trouble. And she was right. And I said, "Well, all right, what do I do?" She said, "Well, tell me about your higher power. What kind of higher power do you have?" And so I started telling her about the churches that I'd been to as a kid and the things that I thought I knew about God. And she stopped me in the middle of that explanation, and she said, "Let me tell you something." She said, "Any God that you can understand will be too small for your needs." And she just blew my mind, you know. I never expected to hear anything like that. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, how long have you been trying to get sober?" Like, "Well, 7 years." She said, "It's not working. You know, you need to be willing to consider something else." And I didn't know anything else. And she said, "Let me tell you this." She said, "When you lay down at night and you go to sleep, your lungs inflate and deflate all night long, and your heart beats all night long, and there's nothing that you do before you go to bed that will make that happen." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, when your time on this earth is up, there is nothing that you could do to add 1 more minute to your time here. When your life is up, you're gone." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Then that is a power greater than yourself. That's something you didn't create, and it's something you can't control." And she said, "If you wake up in the morning and you're breathing, then you are a spiritual being, and God loves you as if you were his only child." Now, when she said the thing about the only child, she absolutely stole me. I mean, she had me, because I was grieving the loss of my kids so bad. I wanted them so bad, and I thought about this for a long time. And I remember thinking, you know, if I could ever find a God that loved me half as much as I love those kids, I bet that would be enough. I bet that would work for me. And I said, "Well, you know, don't I need to know who God is? don't I need to know who I'm going to turn my will and my life over to? And she said, no. She said, it's none of your business who God is. She said, God knows who he is. If you talk to him, he'll answer you. And I said, well, what do I call him? And she said, well, you could call him God. And, I mean, it was just as simple as that. I had never, I had always been looking at spirituality as something that I needed to create in my life. I mean, I knew that I was this sleazy little drunk. I knew that I had violated every ethic I ever had. I had betrayed everyone that was important to me. I had, I lived like an alcoholic woman. This is what I had become. And what she said is, you need to come from developing a life of spirituality from a perspective that it already is. She said, your spirituality is a done deal. It is a given. She said, if you ever wake up in the morning and you're not breathing, you won't be here, so don't worry about it. It was as simple as that. Now, this was something that I could understand, and it was something that I couldn't argue with, So I said, what do I do? And she said, tonight when you're alone, I want you to get on your knees and say this prayer, and you can put it in your own words, say it however you want to say it. But the basic idea that you want to put out there is something like this. You want to say, God, I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you want from me. But if you want anything to do with what's left of my life, then come on, because I don't know where to go from here. And that is, probably to this day, probably one of the most honest prayers I've ever heard. I mean, there was no bargaining there. There was no like, I'll be good if you'll do this, which was usually what I did. You give me what I want, I'll give you what you want. I'll be sober and play by the rules if you give me back my kids. That was the way it went. And there was nothing like that. She said, just throw it out there. She said, I'm not asking you to decide or not decide what philosophy you're going to follow, what religion you're going to have, if any. I'm saying you put all those things on the back burner. You just address yourself to God and see what happens. And I did that, and for me, what happened was it unlocked a door that I didn't even know was locked. It was my conception. It was my, some of my experience of how I looked at God and spiritual matters. See, I remember being a little kid and going to church, and I remember what they told me is that God is good. And they, and that sin is bad. Like, you knew that. God is good and sin is bad. So, they said, in order to please God, you have to do good. Otherwise, you're going to burn forever and ever, And so every time I would try to live a spiritual life, my perspective was that I had to be good. And I would try with all my might to be good. But I am only really good at that for just a little while. And then I'm going to be bad. I'm going to do something I shouldn't do or say something I shouldn't say. And now that I've been bad, God's not going to help me. I had always been praying to some God out there somewhere who may or may not help me. That was just the way it was. It didn't work at home. When I prayed to be protected, when I prayed for my dad not to beat up my mom or not to beat me up, or, I prayed for my dad to not drink or whatever it was I prayed for, it didn't happen. So I guess somewhere along the line I decided God wasn't listening to me anymore. And I didn't even know how to effectuate this. And really that's what our program is about how to have a spiritual experience that changes so many things, Now at that time, when I said that prayer, I didn't know what it was going to be like for me. I didn't really know. It wasn't like, all right, I found the key, now I can be sober, I had no clue. I just knew that this was honest and this made sense to me. This was reasonable. This was something I could do without lying. I could just say, all right, God, if you're out there and you want to do the deal, then let's do the deal. And that's as basic as it was. And really, that's very much like a third step. It says in our third step, right in the big book, right before the third step, it says that the wording of that prayer is very optional, as long as it's expressed without reservation. And I truly didn't know what I was signing on to, turning my life and my will over, but I was willing to try if God was willing to come to me. And, what's happened, she said, you just address yourself to God and see what's happened. What happens is that, like, one little bit at a time, one day at a time, one small increment at a time, I have been able to, begin to grow toward the kind of person that I never would have even dreamed possible for me, I am a completely fear-based person. I am an isolator. The only time in my life I ever feel comfortable is when I am alone. And now I am a person who knows how to walk in, and present what you have given me, what Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. It has given me a backbone for the first time. It's taken away a lot of my fear of people. I don't live free from those things, but I certainly live well enough to be able to deal with those things. And it's made me so effective. My life is, everything in my life is, I owe to Alcoholics Anonymous. I am very happy with who I am today. It hasn't always been that way. And that's one of the there's this place in the book that's one of my favorite parts. And it says, "For if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he cannot survive the certain trials and low spots that are ahead. And if he doesn't survive, he will drink. If he drinks, he will die." And it says, with us, it is just like that. And, I'd like to share in the few minutes that I have left just a couple of the low spots. When I got sober in the 5th of May, 1987 in Kona, Hawaii, I threw myself totally into this. This was something that I had never experienced before. It was like my life was on a different footing. I didn't have this feeling that like, all right, I'm there, I'm sober now. I didn't get that reassurance. It didn't come until enough days, enough 24 hours went by that I could look back and go, gee, I've been doing this a little while. Maybe I'll stay, it wasn't a big, giant spiritual experience for me. It was of the educational variety. It was one little bit at a time. I began to see things differently. One of the hardest things in my life was my relationship with my kids, because I still wanted those kids back. And had I known that wasn't ever going to happen, I'm not sure I would have stayed, to tell you the truth. That's because that's what I wanted more than anything in the world. And they didn't come back until they were way grown up. They didn't come back into my life. And many, many times in the middle there, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would be so depressed and so frustrated, and this would bring me to my knees again. And the women in AA would always tell me, you need to understand that your kids are going to be adults longer than they're going to be kids. And they said, if you stay here and you do what Alcoholics Anonymous asks you to do, if the day ever comes that those kids want to know you, you'll be sober. And you'll be able to walk through that experience of having to face them and answer their questions and create this new relationship. If you don't stay sober and they want to know you, you'll miss the last chance you ever could have, and you can't afford that. And if you stay sober and they never want to know you, at least you'll be sober. And I believed them. That made sense to me. Yes, okay, so I would stay. But every single time, 5 kids, there's 5 birthdays, there's Mother's Day, there's Christmas. Every time there was an event that would come down the line, I would be devastated and on my knees one more time, It was just for me, it was that. For me, that was my deal. Women in AA taught me to tell myself that my children were the price of my sobriety. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I didn't want that to be true, but that was the reality of it for me. I used to be angry. I'd sit in meetings and hear people talk about coming in here and getting your kids back and how wonderful it was, and I used to think, where's mine, And there's another guy that most all of us have heard speak from time to time in AA, and he says that after you've been sober a little while, sometimes it can be a temptation to want to be rewarded for having received this gift. And that was very much my case, I was here doing what I was supposed to do in AA, but I'm not supposed to hurt like this. I'm supposed to be given another chance. And, I didn't feel like I was getting mine for a long time. And my oldest daughter and my son, I have 4 girls and a boy. My oldest daughter and my son have been a long time since they'd seen me or spoken to me. 5 years. They wouldn't speak to me. Nothing. I got a letter from every one of them saying, leave us alone, leave this family alone, we don't want to know you, you had your chance here, go away, And so, the women in AA said, you just honor that request. You just leave them alone. And it was really, really hard. And I just stayed here, and I kept doing what AA told me to do, When I was almost 7 years sober, I decided it had been a long time since I'd heard from him, and I would write one more letter. And I wrote a letter, and I told him, look, if you ever want to meet with me, I would welcome that opportunity. I would love to do that. If you don't want to see me, that's fine. I will also honor that. But I just want you to know that I'm waiting for this. If you ever feel like you're willing to, see me and talk with me, I would love that. And I sent the letter off. They were up in Montana, and I was getting ready to go up there and make a trip up there. And I got a phone call from my son, and he said, yeah, I'll see you, And when I went to see him, I found out some really important things that were as a result of doing my steps, I found out the difference. See, when I did my amends, I'm really, really glad that I had the kind of clear direction that I had. There's a line in the book in the 8th and 9th step where it says that we confess our former ill feelings and we express our regret. And I remember my sponsor at that time was telling me, you know, you've been sorry your whole life. You don't need to be going to these people saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You know, you don't do that. You just say, I so regret the condition of our relationship. I regret it. I regret the path that we've both had to walk. And you honor that experience. You know, Polly came to town and spoke, and she told me the same thing. She's the one who told me to write the letter and to open that door one more time, you know. And when I did that, and she said, you know, be assured that when you go up there and meet these kids, you don't be making any excuses. You know, you don't say to them, well, gosh, if Mom could have done better, Mom would have done better. You know, I mean, that's all true. We all know that. But that's not the point. You know, in effective amends, the word amends means to change. And she said what you need to do is honor their experience. You acknowledge their pain. You acknowledge their history. And you say, yeah, that is the way it was for us. And I so regret that that's the way we had to live. And, you know, I'm very grateful that we don't have to live that way today. And, you know, I'm glad that I had that, because that is a very effective... When I walked through that experience by myself up in Montana with these kids, and I had to walk in and face this boy who was 19 years old, you know, who had been 14 the last time I'd seen him, they were right about that fear. They were right about that part of walking in there. What I found out is that AA, by the 9th step, had given me a gift that I didn't even know I had, and that is the ability to take responsibility without taking the blame. And that was a wonderful thing for me. That was a wonderful, very empowering thing. I could honor that experience, and by doing so, honor myself, honor what Alcoholics Anonymous has created in my life, you know? I didn't have to, like, mea culpa. I didn't have to beat myself anymore. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about feeling sad and guilt and, you know, those kind of things. It was about something honorable. And it was a very, very valuable experience. After I left Montana, my son he was a new member of AA when I was up there, and he started drinking again, and he made it a couple months. He finally woke up one day and just said, you know, I can't live like this. And I've been to AA, and it didn't work for me, and he took his life. And it was nothing that I ever expected to have to walk through, you know. I mean, I was blown away. I thought, for sure, if I stay here and do what AA asked me to do, that I will at some point be given the opportunity to make up for the stuff, you know, to get a chance to be the kind of mom that I wanted to be. And I never dreamed that opportunity might be removed from me completely, you know. And it was the beginning of a very difficult time. That was 6 years ago, the 24th of January. So it's been almost 6 years, and it's been a rough road this last 6 years. You know, there's a whole lot of things that we don't know in AA, you know. One of them is living with unresolved controversy. You know, one of them is living with a situation that isn't going to end, and that's what happened to me with this death. You know, I had to learn how to really accept some things. And it's been a tremendous gift, because I've been able to experience healing in my life that I know I would not have been able to experience had I not had to walk through this. But initially, it was a lot about staying sober and just staying here, you know. And we were muddling along. Terry and I have been married 13 years, and not at that time. We hadn't been married quite that long, but we have now been married 13 years, and we were just, you know, doing it a day at a time. I mean, we were like, things were not happy in the Egan household, let me tell you. There was a lot of, you know, I felt a lot of shame for hurting the way I did, and a lot of guilt. And I felt, you know, in AA, we live in such a solution-oriented society that when any of us are really struggling, I remember being a couple years sober and sitting in a meeting and listening to some guy just say how much he was hurting and how unhappy he was, and thinking, well, what about your spiritual program, guy? You know? I mean, I judged that. I thought, well, obviously, you don't have the connection that you need, you know? But little did I know that there are things in life that being sober doesn't make go away, you know. I didn't know that, and I needed to find that out, I guess. I ended up being the person in meetings that a lot of people looked at and said, where's your spiritual answer, you know? And the truth is, I didn't know. All I knew is that I was staying sober one day at a time. I was staying here because I didn't know what else to do, and I did have a lot of guilt and shame about it, and things were not happy at home, and it was a real struggle. But I was taught by strong sponsorship that you stay in Alcoholics Anonymous, you go to the prisons, you go to the jails, you stay active with the newcomers, and just inch by inch I started to get through it, and it happened again. My second daughter was 25 years old and 5 years sober in AA, and she just got sick and died. Just boom. And that was 3 years ago. And, you know, there was a time in here where I was just saying, like, this cannot be happening. This is not what I got sober for. And it was very difficult to show up and tell this story, you know. And, like, it's not a lot about happy, joyous, and free for a little stretch here. But there are some really important things to know. You know, I had people in AA that were loving, you know, people that love me a lot. I had one woman that told me that the reason I was having so much trouble with this is I hadn't done a good enough third step. And of course, I am berating myself like crazy. God, I'm going to all the prisons there are to go to. I'm sponsoring anybody that'll let me, you know. I mean, I'm going to meetings. I went to meetings every day. I read the big book. I'm on my knees begging God, please help me. Please help me. And because I was hurting, I felt like I was failing, you know. And what I have found out, if nothing else, I have found out that grieving is not about sadness. Grief is about healing. Grief is about coming to, you know, I don't know. I mean, it sounds so corny to say to embrace the experience because, believe me, this was not what I wanted. But the gifts that have come to me as a result of this experience are more precious than anything I've ever known. And what I have today is a confidence in Alcoholics Anonymous that goes beyond anything I would have ever known. Today I can be a woman with a lot of peace and a lot of happiness. My home is not torn apart by sadness. I am very blessed and grateful for the gifts that my kids have brought to me. Daniel taught me about the preciousness of sobriety. He taught me that, you know, I cannot survive life if I don't have sobriety. That's what he faced. Without it was not possible. I know that as an alcoholic, as sick as I am, I've got, a little chance of surviving life if I'm sober. But if I'm not sober, I don't have a prayer because the self-pity and the grief will just eat me alive. You know, and as long as I'm living in God's world, I can see some good that comes from these things. And Tracy was a beautiful woman who was 5 years sober, sponsored women that I get to see today. And believe me, that is so precious to me, to see these women that she worked with, that she took through the steps, that are sober and have lives today with their children. That is a gift. Tracy gave me about the gift of laughter. And I saw this woman surrender to a situation that she was head and shoulders above me spiritually. But it was the process of this gift that I have really found a power greater than myself that has solved my problem. Now, I still have stuff in my life that isn't perfect, but I'll tell you what, I love my life. I absolutely love the way I live today. I like what I see when I look in the mirror, and it's what was given to me by Alcoholics Anonymous. The healing that I have with my other children is incredible. My middle daughter got sober as a result of these 2 deaths. She's now sober 5 years. Beautiful young woman, married to this great guy. You know, she's just got a great life. She has her problems too. You know, all of us have problems. This is the deal, is that happy, joyous, and free is not the norm. You know, I have a friend back in the desert who says the steps are not quaaludes. And that is a true statement. You know, I mean, the steps do not take all the pain away. This is not about pain-free living. It's about the ability, whether we can grasp it or not, to walk through the difficulty and be brought through something that I know I would not have survived if I had not had sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. My life is a gift to me today, and I got it here. My relationships mean more to me. My sponsor, I adore my sponsor, and I love her husband too. And I love the man I'm married to. This man is my best friend. He is my best friend. Trust me, he knows every rotten thing about me, and he loves me anyway, you know. We have a wonderful life. We are blessed beyond belief. But, you know, it isn't always about happy, joyous, and free, and it doesn't mean that we're failing if we're struggling. You know, as long as we're breathing and as long as we're sober, there's a chance of surviving whatever. And I'm very grateful for that. And I hope, more than anything, that I can, you know, be an example that you don't have to drink no matter what. Even if you were so miserable, all you can do is spit nails, because that's about what I was doing for a couple of years around here. Thank you. I've gone a little bit over my time, but I appreciate your patience in listening to me.